sanctions on Russia, support for Ukraine, strengthening our defense together. All of this works for peace.
Well, I think it's a very significant agreement. Above all, that finally Ukraine's friends and partners can get together, apparently, and unify the effort to counter Russian aggression. There are several concerns I have about the agreement. Primarily, its vagueness. And second, I do not think this will be something welcomed in Moscow. I think President Putin will be infuriated. I think President Putin will perhaps drag out the negotiations, but all of this is contingent on a ceasefire. And above all, President Putin can drag out those negotiations by refusing to agree to a ceasefire. So we'll have to see, but I think that we're not that much closer to the end of the war. What we are closer to is a coherent Western position in support of Ukraine to hope the war will end. The problem is that I don't believe the mathematical estimates for the last several weeks. I think 90% was much too optimistic. What this does is provide Ukraine the security guarantees, as you said in your introduction. What it does not do is compel the Russians to go to the negotiating table, nor does it solve a key issue on the table which they cannot agree on, and that is the question of whether Ukraine gives back the territory, allows Russia to take more territory, and Ukraine gives up the territory that's theirs by international law. There's no indication that that will happen. Moreover, President Putin now is really in a much more constricted position than he was even a month ago. The Russian economy is going down. The Maduro episode in Venezuela has been seen widely as a humiliation of Putin's foreign policy. This is not likely to put Moscow in a good mood, certainly a good mood enough to make concessions on key areas such as the land swap. What will bring Moscow to the table, and again, what we have today is an important diplomatic step, but what will bring Moscow to the table is this process that we saw today, strong military support of Ukraine to enable Ukraine to convince Putin in particular that he will not get his war objectives, and third, very strict economic pressure on Russia, whose economy is not only slowing down, it's heading toward depression because of all the expense of the war. Russia now spends a third of its budget on the war. Russia loses a huge amount of men every day, including a near record high last month. All these pressures together on the Kremlin may bring us to a solution that everybody wants, which is a free and independent Ukraine. Will Putin agree right now? Unfortunately, I don't think that he will. We have to keep this pressure on the Kremlin and hope that as 2026 plays out, the situation will go in a way that convinces the Kremlin they will not be able to subjugate Ukraine. And frankly, I think they're far away from that right now. The U.S. has put its hand on the scales, and this has tilted it toward a more favorable, probable, possible outcome for Ukraine. But the U.S. can tighter sanctions on Russia. Their oil industry has been affected even since last week by the Venezuela events. So the U.S. can do that as well. But I think the U.S. can also be diplomatically tough with Putin to say, no, you will not control Ukraine. You have all these other possibilities of better relations with the United States and Britain and France and the West in general, but you must stop this aggression. And again, as I said, this is not likely to convince Putin right now, and perhaps not for quite a few months.